So last month, several communities, including the haiku community, lost a wonderful person, the poet and translator Patricia Donegan. And I'd like to dedicate my reading today to Pat. Allen Ginsberg once described Pat's work as an excellent, clear articulation, both of bits of perception and extended imaginative flight. And I'll start by sharing two of Pat's haiku. I lay down all my heavy packages. Autumn moon. Pampas grass bending, endless dreams. And now a few of my haiku. Porch swing. My feelings come and go. A moment's longing. Wind stirs the potted geraniums. Forgiven. A chevron of geese regains its shape. A bit of sea foam in my open hands. Gratitude. Wading in, we hold hands until the first wave. In this kiss, all our other kisses, summer solstice. Midsummer heat, cow parsnips broken beneath their own weight. Anniversary, picking more apples than our basket could hold. The crow's flight leads me to it, day moon. Exhaling, flute notes between the trees. Snowy egret pulling the fish out of its reflection. My plans for the future change again, riptide. Another year we hadn't planned on, wild huckleberries. Saying goodbye, my breath blown backward. Prayer. Listen. Closer. Prayer. So much I don't know, don't believe, don't make holy as before. Winter mist fading into twilight, tree-lined foothills becoming one form. When will I try again? The backs of angels. Still on the mantle, a faded blue-gray angel, specks of gold glitter clinging to her age-soft wood. Almost balsa, she is light. The ornate mirror behind her shows her entirety at every glance. The dark, worn eyes, the flat heads of nails that hold her wings in place. We have said, no God, no presence here. Hung La Omnipresencia de Dios and Nuestra Señora de la Luz as artwork, even as we have a glint of awareness in steeping tea, folding sheets, weeding the chrysanthemum bed, that something about us is without a talisman. Unable to name it, we peer too closely at the dusk, catching only the outline of retreat. We've left her there, reflected above the hearth, watching the color on all sides continue to fade. Cañada del Oro. Christmas morning. Beneath cold Tucson sun, I walk Cañada del Oro's dry riverbed, remembering rain on fir, soft moss and bracken fern, buffleheads diving beneath the waves. How my mother's statue of St. Francis stood surrounded by ivy at the property line, a destination for my prayers. But here words slip off smooth stones, each drop of faith absorbed by Ocotillo for their fleeting blooms, as I search the unfamiliar for a new way to pray. This next poem is a haibun, and I'm reading several haibun tonight. It's a Japanese form that usually involves varying combinations of prose paragraphs and haiku. Mine are usually a single paragraph followed by a haiku, or maybe interspersed paragraphs and haiku, but there are a lot of ways you can approach this form. And just to set this one up, if you've been inside a Catholic church, you know that they are filled with artwork, iconography. Some of it's very beautiful, and some of it's quite graphic. One of the things that you'll see around the nave of the church, the area where the congregation sits, are the Stations of the Cross. So these are visual representations of 14 stages of Christ's crucifixion, beginning with his being condemned to death and ending with his body being laid in the tomb. People pray the stations, and so there are words that the priest says and words that the parishioners say and prayers that go along with the different stages. And this is done especially during Lent, a season we just entered into a few days ago, and it's part of the Lenten devotions. Devotion. As children, we entered the church quietly, walking behind our parents to a row halfway up the center aisle. We genuflected, made the sign of the cross, and slid into our seats. I was mesmerized by the statues, reliefs, and stained glass windows filling the perimeter. The Blessed Mother, Joseph with the baby Savior, the Stations of the Cross, the crucified Christ. Sometimes I found comfort in Mary's gentle face. Other times I closed my eyes, not wanting to believe. Via Crucis, Jesus falls a third time. The title of this next haibun alludes to a chapter in the Christian Bible that's often called the chapter of joy or the joyful chapter, and sometimes the epistle of joy. It's when Paul is in prison awaiting execution, and he's writing to the Philippians and counseling that they find contentment regardless of their circumstances. Epistle of Joy. When her parents died, Kitty raised her younger siblings, all 12 of them. In the late afternoons, she took them to the coal mines. They waited for miners to emerge, hoping to receive scraps from the lunch pails. She lived her entire life in the same Pennsylvania row house where she was born, even after marrying and later burying her husband. She hung cotton underclothes to dry across the backyard, argued daily with her neighbor, and sat in the same pew each Sunday. Family reunion. My great aunt's laughter, louder than anyone else. Things we carry. At the third grade lunch hour, I left the classroom and went to the main building, waited in line, then headed back with my tray of food, a small carton of milk, a watery stew, and a piece of warm buttered white bread. Halfway there, I saw him, my 5-year-old brother waiting after morning kindergarten. Skinny and shy, with his hesitant half smile, he looked for me each day, and I gave him the slice of bread to eat on his walk home. Distant sunset. Memories nourish me wherever I am. Years later, coping with schizoaffective disorder, his blood sugar spiked into the 500s, a side effect of the medicine he took to maintain some quality of life. He died in his sleep, leaving a home filled with the detritus of crisis and all the songs he created over the years. Packing up my brother's house, letting go of what I cannot save. This next poem is very much like a haibun, but it's a piece of Tonka prose, and it just means that I've traded out the haiku for the 5-line Japanese Tonka form. The title refers to the basketball game Horse, where one person takes a shot and then the next player has to make that shot or they get the letter H, and if they miss the next shot they get the letter O, and so on. The first person to spell horse loses. Horse. When my brother was very young, he tried to play t-ball and discovered he preferred individual sports. He took up diving, snowboarding, and cycling. I loved team sports, including soccer, volleyball, and especially basketball. My dad taught me to do layups and hook shots and to practice my free throws. Rinse your mouth at the water fountain, he'd say, or you'll get a stitch in your side from drinking too much water. Each time I left home after a college vacation, the last thing Dad and I did was play a game of horse out in the driveway. Closing Dad's workshop, one final time, I take one for the team. My brother's t-ball in my coat pocket. The title of this next poem refers to, it's a sailing term, so tacking, if you're turning the bow of the boat into the wind, that's called tacking. It's the slower but the safer way to turn. Tacking. Sailing the small laser about the lake, sunlight reflected off the waves and into our eyes. Breezes caught the sail and our hair. We tacked, then leaned back, sometimes touching the water with our hands. Those weeks before college felt carefree and filled with first love. We didn't know how quickly time would pass, and we would be carried off by different winds. Stepping onto the dock, the boat rocks a little. Grace. On Saturdays, Jay and Diane walked to my apartment, Jay with her Jack Daniels and Diane with her red wine. I always had music on, usually playing and replaying the 10,000 Maniacs album in my tribe. One weekend, Diane's friend came along. I can't remember her actual name, but Diane called her Grace because she was amazing and singing. Natalie Merchant was singing Hey Jack Kerouac, and I suddenly understood that Diane was in love with Grace. No one said anything. I'm not even sure Diane knew. We took our flasks and set out for a walk through town. 4 Catholic college girls moving into the warm California night. Graduation day. The salt taste of a secret kiss. The next 2 poems are Renge. They're an American linked verse form that was created in the early 1990s in California. There are 6 verses, 4 are haiku, and then 2 are 2-line linking verses. And I wrote these with Eugene poet Harriet Terry West, and Eve Muller has agreed to come up and read Terry's part in these so that we can have two voices. Thank you.
We're different heights.
I know, I thought about that
I'll
immediately. No, I'm really quite tall.
I think that'll be okay.
So with Renge, there are usually a couple of themes happening at the same time. There's the main one that's often gestured to in the title. And so for our first one, it's referring to paintings by Georgia O'Keeffe. And then there's also a subtle eroticism that's woven through the links. And the second one, Mythos, is referring to different parts of Greek mythology, but also the summer season. So Open, after paintings by Georgia O'Keeffe. Sunlight shining back from them, blue morning glories.
Petals of red canna pulsing in the heat.
So open, they crowd each other, copper roses.
Deeper and deeper, the pull of the black iris.
Out from its core, pink tulips, colored swirls.
White moonflower, cradled by rippling leaves. This is Mythos. Yeah. Summer heat, my thoughts turn to Icarus.
Waxing his vintage Mercury in the shade.
Scented breeze, we let the laurel run wild.
Rose-colored dawn, the fire crew sets another controlled burn.
On a clear night, the stars and their stories.
Silver anniversary, we slip from the zodiac into moonlit waves. And I'll just end with two more haiku by Pat Donegan. Thank you, wind, for caressing this old face. Winter afternoon, not one branch moves. I listen to my bones. Thanks so much.